Creating a perfect, stunning design that would rewrite the history of monster creation is a matter of trials, errors, failures, and just a handful of successes that can be counted on a single short page. Alien, Predator, King Kong, Godzilla, Frankenstein monsters, The Thing, The Fly, The Rancor, E.T., Gollum, The Balrog, T-1000, The Cenobites, The Velociraptors, the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man, The Pale Man, The Demogorgon, The Coverfield Monster, Audrey 2, The Werewolf, The Blob, The Sandworms, The Facehugger, all awesome designs and toolbox for upcoming generation of aspiring artists. Not everyone is gifted with that much talent, and we are bound to drown in various copycats, knockoffs, and cheap replicas of greatness. And that's okay, as long as the story is good. Oftentimes, when the subject of Predator design comes up, the story is overly simplified, leaving no trace of the thought process of the screenwriter, director, producer, and a studio. When watching those behind-the-scenes documentaries, there is very little to no mention of why the original idea of the Predator was appealing to everyone, including the producer and the director, or what happened between the first draft and the decision to completely change the creature design. Most of its context is simply cut out from the story, as if the studio loved wasting time on Van Damme's version of the Predator, making him suffer just for fun. Then comes the sudden realization that it's not as good as advertised, so they quickly pivot to cook up something else while pretending they knew all along how bad it would be. And now it's time to make it right in a completely different way? Really? Oh no! As painful as it was to admit, the initial failure was quickly sinking in. To the team's credit, after taking a retrospective look at what went wrong, digesting feedback from the studio, and facing critical analysis on both sides, the creative department and the studio, several key lessons were learned from Van Damme's misadventure as a stuntman. The movie producer and the director sold the project to the studio with the idea that Predator is a swift, agile, lightweight, insect-like creature running around the jungle. It was supposed to be stealthy, stalking Arnold Schwarzenegger and his mercenary unit. Casting director Jackie Birch thought she had just the guy for the role. The reason Van Damme got the part was that he could jump high, move fast, and had an exceptional balance. His early ballet lessons paid off. When studio was looking for a martial artist, those were the qualities they needed in a stuntman. Why? Well, try running around on stilts over uneven jungle terrain while wearing a suit that not only obscures your vision, but also severely limits mobility. An untrained stuntman with poor balance would break both legs just attempting the first step. Having a great sense of balance was everything for this performance, and it had little to do with the actual martial arts skills. To Van Damme's disappointment, he didn't realize this. For some time, he believed that filmmakers were charmed with his high and round kicks. It wasn't his fault. Nobody bothered to explain those pesky details to him beforehand. Alright, so what were those sore realizations after spending some time shooting with the original Predator suit? First of all, it looked like a rat. Bad design is bad design, and not much can be done to fix it even in post-production. It looked silly and borderline comical, making it hard to keep a straight face on set. Imagine what the audience reaction would have been in the theaters. Best comedy of the year? Number 2. When the majority of the actors are over 6 feet tall, it is difficult to create a convincing threat coming from a creature of roughly the same height. Even though Van Damme was well below the 6-foot mark, he was supposed to wear stilts to make up the difference, but that still wouldn't have been enough. His body mass wasn't on par with someone like Arnold, Jesse, Bill, or Sonny. The creature's agility requirements were counterproductive. Number 3. Wearing a full-body suit in this kind of environment is an enormous challenge for anybody, no matter the training. One cannot defy the laws of nature. A stuntman will overheat quickly just standing still, let alone trying to perform fast-paced action. And number 4, this role requires someone who knows how to work with the character while wearing a suit. So thanks to Van Damme, he was a good test subject and also scapegoat for the people in charge, primarily the producer. Somebody had to be axed to satisfy the studio's bloodthirsty demand for the failure. Alright, now that we know what the main challenges were during the initial shoot with the Red Alien, it's no surprise that John McTiernan revised his vision of Predator and its behavior. When Stan Winston got involved with the redesign of the creature, he did not have to start from scratch. He studied the concept art of the original Predator and kept several major ideas for the next version. The Rastafarian warrior theme was something Stan loved and preserved, but his immediate suggestion was to significantly elevate the creature's stature. He asked the producer to find the tallest guy available, not just to offset the height difference with the rest of the crew, but to tower over any of them. There should be no visual dispute about who is the king of the jungle. We humans perceive height as the most dominant attribute, which is something I'm thinking of making a separate video on. Anthropology is a fascinating science. So, the height issue was addressed, but it was still missing something that would make the creature stand apart from anything else prior to its design. It is a well-known story about Stan sharing a seat on a plane with James Cameron while making his trip to Japan. James was the one who suggested one of the main changes, and in my opinion it was the one that made the Predator an icon. Well, one out of two. The second was Kevin Peter Hall and his moves, but we will get to that later. So, James shared with Stan his vision of how he was always wondering what something would look like with mandibles. On a spot, Stan began to draw that awesome jaw of the Predator while James kept pointing out what features and characteristics it might have. By the way, if you may not know, James Cameron is widely recognized as a talented sketch artist. His concept art is simply amazing. He would often create the entire storyboard by himself. After all, he's the one who made the initial draft sketch of the Aryan Queen and the T-800 exoskeleton. So, what did Stan and James came up with? First of all, mandibles. The Predator would have 4 large, external mandibles that extended outwards from its main mouth. Those mandibles are claw-like and articulate independently, opening and closing in a way that resembles insect or lobster anatomy. Secondary, inner mouth. Behind the mandibles lies a more traditional humanoid mouth with teeth and tongue. The mandibles served a dual purpose, enhancing the Predator's bite strength and aiding in speech and vocalization. The jaw design reinforces the Predator's identity as a hunter and the creature of strength, with mandibles that could presumably tear flesh apart. They also contributed well to its menacing expressions, flaring outward during aggression or roaring. And then there is that hair. Dreadlock-like strands, long, cylindrical and flexible, resembling tentacles. They cascade down the back of the head, framing the Predator's face and extending past its shoulders. The hair has smooth, slightly segmented surface that evokes a mix of organic and synthetic materials. The design blends tribal aesthetics with alien technology, giving the impression that the hair could serve a functional purpose such as sensory perception. Stan's art team would come up with the rest of the ammunition, finishing the look. Plasma caster mini cannon, laser-guided aiming system synchronized with the helmet point of view, wrist blades, and the big boom, the self-destruct device. I love those weird-looking symbols for the countdown. Whoever thought of that, big kudos. With the new design, big and tall, semi-bulky, muscular but relatively lean body type, the next obvious change was to address the movement. With the creature probably weighing slightly over 300 pounds, it was no longer suited for fast-paced, agile movements. In movies, to make something feel even bigger than it actually is, its motion is slowed down, creating the illusion of ginormous object. Limb travel time is how we judge the size of the creature, and with no clear references of how big something might be, slow motion acts like measuring tape. Take a ridiculously big monster like Godzilla or any other enormous creatures, and you will notice how slow they move. Kevin Peter Hall had to adjust his movements to account for the new Predator costume weight. Although this change wasn't just made to increase the Predator's intimidating factor, remember, some lessons were learned from the prior Van Damme version. It was virtually impossible to move fast in the jungle terrain. It was hard and dangerous even for a much smaller, well-trained martial artist. Considering Kevin Peter Hall was around 7 feet 2 inches tall, there was no way for him to accelerate and run around, rapidly changing direction. He would definitely sprain a knee or break a leg. The Predator's suit, while visually stunning, was bulky and difficult to move in. It was heavy and restrictive. The headpiece of the suit severely limited Hall's vision. As a result, The Predator's move choreography had to be simplified and rehearsed extensively so Hall could perform it without relying heavily on sight. And then there was still an issue with overheating while wearing this body-covering suit in the 100-degree oven called the jungle. The suit was unbearably stifling in such a humid setting. Learning from Van Damme's suffering, the decision was made to minimize its wear time to much smaller increments. What used to be 20 minutes for Jean-Claude was reduced to maximum of 10 minutes, often no more than 5 minutes, before the mask had to come off to let Kevin breathe and ventilate. This time around they were much more merciful with the stuntman. Of course, this influenced the pacing of scenes and required McTiernan to break up filming into smaller chunks, often focusing on the Predator's movement rather than exciting combat. Literally, the only combat was limited to a single sequence at the very end of the movie, the rest focused on its stealthy, creepy stalking, creating a sense of fear and suspense. And I loved it that way. It reminded me of Steven Spielberg's Jaws. It's a kind of a similar situation. Due to the mechanical shark malfunction, they had to rely on point of view and sound until the very end before finally relieving that 25-footer megalodon. Filming in the dense jungle of Mexico was physically taxing. Kevin Hall had to adjust his steps to navigate slippery, uneven ground while maintaining the deliberate, predatory walk. McTiernan wanted the Predator to feel like part of the environment. Hall's movements were adjusted to interact with trees, vines and vegetation naturally, creating the impression that the creature was both stalking and blending with its surroundings. Although I couldn't shake the image of 300-pound Rambo making an abnormal amount of noise jumping from tree to tree, that one always cracked me up. How did the Predator make it so quietly? Remember the sound the Predator made while walking past Arnold covered in mud? That was loud. And that was just a small jump, almost a step. Imagine the sound a tree-jumping silverback gorilla would make. Definitely not very stealthy. I guess if the invisible Predator were making so much noise around the commandos, they would probably have sprinted out of the jungle 15 minutes into the movie, with Jesse Ventura leading the pack. There was one more choreography adjustment to be made, the actual moves of the Predator, how it makes a step, raises its hands and turns its head. This was a crucial finishing touch to the complex predatory behavior of an alien hunter. Kevin and John McTiernan studied the movements of predators in nature, particularly large cats, to emulate their quiet, stalking approach. Those animals perfectly convey a sense of menace through their fluid movements, which were adapted for the Predator. They wanted a combination of stealth, calculated move, and burst of lethal power. The Predator's design by Stan Winston with its long limbs and dreadlock-like appendages greatly influenced how the creature could move. Kevin Peter Hall had to work around the suit limitations while emphasizing its alien physiology. John McTiernan asked Kevin Hall to exaggerate his motions and pause deliberately, making the character feel calculated and in control. They experimented with the different stances and postures. The final decision was to lean slightly forward and keep the arms loose but ready, creating a more animalistic silhouette and enhancing the creature's otherworldly appearance. The Predator's deliberate motion made it seem confident and unhurried, total dominance, like a shepherd dog steering a mercenary unit into a trap, like a herd of sheep. The crew provided constant feedback on how the Predator's movements looked on camera. Adjustments were made to ensure that Hall's actions convey the desired sense of menace and alien intelligence. Because the suit was cumbersome and filming in it was exhausting, the Predator's movements were often shot separately from the rest of the cast. This allowed the team to focus entirely on perfecting Hall's performances without external distractions. By the way, some of the Predator's iconic actions, like the way it scans the environment or stretches its hand before the fight, were suggested and improvised by Kevin Hall. Fight sequences between the Predator and Schwarzenegger character required careful planning. Adjustments were made on set to ensure that the Predator's movement looked powerful but not clumsy, despite the suit limitations. The close-quarter fight in the climax underwent multiple revisions on set. Kevin Peter Hall's background in dance and martial arts allowed him to incorporate smooth, fluid but impactful strikes, making the Predator attacks appear both alien and deadly. His dance experience gave the character a sense of intelligence and control in its movements, with precision and grace, crucial for the character that needed to appear as calculated, experienced hunter. Some of the Predator's combat moves, such as its stalking and striking poses, were inspired by martial art, giving it a disciplined and effective fighting style. Kevin Peter Hall's portrayal of the Predator set the standard for the future iterations of the character. His understanding of how to use body language to convey menace and intelligence left a permanent mark on the franchise. Kevin's ability to translate the director's idea into physical performance is what made the Predator an icon of 80s alien monster creatures. His ability to incorporate movement with such finesse is one of the reasons his portrayal of the Predator is exquisite. It is incredibly unfortunate that Kevin had the chance to play the Predator in just 2 movies. His tragic passing put an end to the ideal version of what the Predator should look and move like on screen. Big but fluid, strong but calculated. There was so much elegance in his performance, nothing artificial nor forced. The audience absolutely believed in his portrayal of the ultimate hunter in the entire universe. Thank you for watching and come back for more!